Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Motivation and That. I'm Natalie, I'm your host, and today I'm super excited because this will probably be a little bit more filled with laughter type of episode based on the fantastic guest that I have with me today. And I'm excited for that because I think we've talked about a lot of heavy topics lately and injecting some just comedy and lightness, but also understanding there's so much more to this topic today of comedy than I even understood. And in my first 15 minutes with Lynn Harris, our guest today, I learned so much. And so I'm really excited to bring a little bit of this to all of the listeners that we have out there. So let me just kick it right over to Lynn Harris, CEO of Gold Comedy, and a just fantastic, honest, transparent, aware individual. So, Lynn, let's learn a little bit more about you. Who are you? How did you get into this area? What has it taught you? Why are you passionate about it? Like, just open up the floodgates and let us in on it.
Oh no, now I have to be funny. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Um, yeah, okay. We'll start back. We'll go reverse chronologically. So what I do now, and you'll see why. What I do now and what I have done most recently is I'm the founder of Gold Comedy. What is Gold Comedy? Gold is the comedy school and professional network and content studio where women and non-binary creators and really others come to build their comedy careers from any point, from beginning to already emerging and someone you've heard of, and join a powerful network and make funny stuff that gets seen on all kinds of stages and screens. Now, why? Why do I do this? I do this, and it's really a kind of a culmination of all of the things I have been doing or hoping that the world will do uh, forever. What do I mean by that? I love comedy. I did stand up for a long time. I've been kind of not always like on the dance floor of comedy, but definitely at the party, in terms of using comedy and humor in other professional and political capacities, to talk about or even create campaigns around issues that are not funny, but find appropriate ways to use comedy to either skewer the people who need to be skewered or to create a delivery system for a difficult issue. And so that's partly why it matters very much to me who creates comedy, right? Because comedy matters. It definitely matters as a distraction, as the so-called best medicine. I think it's tied, in fairness, probably tied with the polio vaccine, but okay. And like, for sure we need that, but it also is a cultural force that has an impact on opinions, norms, and even policy sometimes, and certainly attitudes, certainly the way we think about power structures. So I wanted to have a say, or at least a piece of, or at least I wanted to be part of creating a more inclusive comedy industry, because when you make people laugh, you make people listen. And if we can create more, if we can encourage people to listen to not just the people they're used to listening to, but a wide range of all sorts of people, that matters because women are people, that matters because comedy's a job, and it also matters because and here I'm going to kind of get off my soapbox and then I'll get off. It matters because it's like one small but mighty way to really change how we think about who has power. And so that's what we're doing. Individually, we're helping people build their comedy careers. In the aggregate, we're trying to change the face of power. And that's where I got off my soapbox. And I'm happy to go back into like all the sort of tributaries that led me there. But that's kind of that's like my manifesto.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, I know that, and you mentioned it, kind of laughter is medicine is always one of the things we've heard when I was growing up and I'd be homesick from school. I would watch Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. That was what my mom
Totally.
would stick on the TV. And I just thought it was great. Jerry Lewis was one of my favorite people. And, it always made you feel a little better because of that distraction component.
Totally.
But I think in a world right now, too, where we have a lot of noise happening and there is a lot of heaviness on just any topic that you can come up with, we've gotten into this state of we're all searching for something that helps us see those topics in different lights and to, kind of shine a little light here and there. But then it's also like this, do we talk about it? Do we not talk about it? Where's our safe places to have these, conversations and make light of things? And so it's super timely, I think, overall, especially to your point where this power dynamic shift in society has gotten a
Yeah.
little crazy.
A little crazy. No, hashtag no kings. And it's interesting though, because the comedy is a force in explicit ways and then in kind of sneaky ways. So to your point, yeah, we need to find ways to, again, use comedy as a delivery system, if nothing else, to help us no, we're not crazy. Like when we turn on late night, we're like, okay, right. Like, yeah, I was like, yes, that happened. And yes, that host is appropriately punching up, right?
Mhm.
And now I sort of see what's bananas about whatever it was that happened today in words that I now have words to explain um why whatever happened, bulldozering the East Wing is like the least of it. I now have words to sort of see and feel that why that's crosses a line, and also see and feel that I'm not the only one in my I'm in my head going, am I the wait is it me that or and then but then also and then there's so that's comedy where we get agreement, and that's a good feeling, right? And then there's comedy where you can use kind of cleverness and questioning and whatever in sort of a middle ground where people are, you can't necessarily make someone do a 180, but if someone's primed or has some questions or is starting to question some long held beliefs or whatever, there's an opening there for comedy to find that commonality where, if someone doesn't know how they feel about gay marriage, or someone doesn't know how they feel about abortion, or someone doesn't know how they feel about, all these issues that can be really tricky, there is some middle ground, again, when someone is primed, that if someone talks about, it just reframes the issue for them in a comedic, non-shaming, non-scoldy way, that someone could be like, oh, so it is about the cruelty or whatever it is, like, oh, and then it can just, nudge someone just a little bit. And I think that's useful, obviously. And then finally, because then it's about finding common ground. It's not about lecturing someone. It's about, we agree on the common kind of primal and core values here, right? And then the third thing is, like, I don't know, you could just go to a comedy show where not one single political thing is talked about, right? It's all about, complaining about, I don't know, dating and the weather, right? But if the people you're seeing in the lineup do not all look like you or do not all share your background, that's pretty powerful also. If you're watching someone who, from another country, another color, another religion, another gender, talk about, even if it's just the weather, the dynamic right there is that person gets to talk for 8 minutes and you have to listen. It's a great way to have to listen because it's funny and you get to laugh. But, like, when else does that happen? When else, and I'm looking at us white people, like, when else do we have to, like, have to is a strong word, but, like, when else do we pay, not just asked to sit and, like, listen to someone that we are like culturally trained is less important than our whiteness, to, like, talk? I mean, and that's incredibly powerful, and that just kind of gets absorbed through osmosis. And and can help change the way that's what I was talking about, comedy being power.
Mhm.
Like, it can help change our it can help shift our biases, it can open our minds, it can help us just like stop and listen to people we don't often stop and listen to. So it's pretty huge, it's pretty potent.
Well, and it makes me think about, how many times have we watched a stand up, and especially stand ups where, a joke happens and there's ripples in the audience, and then the comedian says, you can laugh at that.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah.
even from that perspective, there's a component of learning, I think, where some shifts culturally have gone to something that, I hate to say once was maybe very weaponized, and now the power's been taken back. Now it's being shifted into a different narrative. And, now you're starting to get these little things. Now, I think there's still an element of the environment you're in. If that joke was said somewhere else, you might not want, it might not
Yeah,
be the same dynamic, but that,
yeah. But
that
that's a good move. It's like a canny move that's a smart comic, basically, because that joke, right, and they may not have to say that in another, it may go the other way, right? They may not have to say that in a different room, but it's a canny move because, that also, like, I mean, I'm sorry to put it this way, but that's also a learning moment for the crowd, and because it's coming from someone who can say that, whatever it was, number one, probably. And the other is that, this is not, this is a related feature of that, of what you're talking about, and that is when comedians talk about things that are like traumatic for themselves. And that's a huge, people talk a lot these days about the really powerful intersection of comedy and trauma, and when done right, and when done responsibly, and when done in a way that the comic is ready and the comic knows how to take care of the audience, then that also can be really transformational. And by taking care of the audience, I mean either they telegraph some way, somehow, that it's okay for the audience to laugh, or they just say it. And then that gives the audience permission to really just listen.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the trauma. I know we're going to touch on dark humor probably at some point, because that's a very kind of near and dear to my heart. But having seen that, having had friends that have gone to an open mic night because they're like, you know what, I now find the humor in the situation I grew up in, and I want to laugh about it. Or that's how I deal with my mom on a regular basis. I'm like, no, you can laugh at this. Like, it was completely absurd, and and to be able to, I think, remove some of the virality from it that just it can get really toxic if it just sits in you and you can't look at it in different manners. So it's one of the components of, we're talking, we've mentioned stand up in big rooms, but what about comedy just between you and a loved one, or you and a small friend group? And what's that dynamic potentially look like? Because I know when we first chatted, you said there are so many people that probably have this in them and they don't even realize it, or they don't know different ways that they can use it, writing, or it doesn't have to be speaking. It's not this haha, being in a film or something like that. So what are some other avenues and places and environments where comedy really can have that power if tapped into?
Sure. And first of all, one last thing I wanted to pick up on, around what you said before, which is, you really actually said something that's like a cognitive science thing when you were talking about, and I'm not a cognitive scientist, but some of my best friends are. And that thing about when you can do comedy about something that was traumatic for you, that means, like, by definition, you're able to kind of, pull it out of yourself, gross metaphor, but okay, and hold it at arm's length and kind of contemplate it. Like, well, what was funny about that? Like, where is the funny? Okay, not that. Turns, looks again. Okay, that, and that actually, I don't know which is the chicken and which is the egg, but that's part of how, the process is part of how comedy can uh it's not the same as therapy by any stretch, but it's part of that process of distancing yourself, um, and really asserting that this is a thing that happened to me. It's not a thing that is me, and I have power over it by finding the funny. Um, And as far as like, yeah, so we've been talking about stand up. To answer your other question, here comes my cat. Hope no one's allergic. As far as other kinds of comedy, first there are other kinds of comedy in the world, and then there are other kinds of comedy in your world, right? So we've been talking about stand up because it's the one I know most about. It's familiar to a lot of people. Um, but when I say comedy writ large, I'm talking about, who's on the show, who's on the funny shows, who's on the sitcoms, who's on the dramedies, who's in the writers' room, who are our late night hosts. Oh, I'll tell you, they're all five of them are straight white dudes. We love them, but we're looking for more. Uh, uh the people in the writers rooms, all the people even who write funny brand, marketing, that's in demand. That's, to me, part of humor. And part of comedy, people who do sketch comedy, people who write sketch comedy, people who perform in sketch comedy, people who are comic actors. I mean, there's just, I'm sure, improv, there's just so much. And there's so many people who say, like, well, my friends say I'm funny, but I don't see how I could be a comedian. And, like, okay, sure. Like, if you really just don't want to be a comedian, I'm not telling you, like, what are you talking about? You have to go be a comedian. Like, okay, sure. But there is some, if your friends think you're funny, there is, like, they're right. So, like, if they're right. So I don't want people to, like, take themselves out of the running if they're curious about being involved in some aspect of the comedy world. And by the way, I didn't even talk about all the other stuff behind the camera: production, editing, how to light and sound. We have people in Gold who know whose expertise is in lighting and sound for comedy. So you can be like a gearhead and be in comedy. So I think often there's a disconnect between, like, if people are like, well, my friends say I'm funny, but then they look at other comics who they like, even, and they're like, but I'm not like them. I can't do that. I can't do what. Why can't I think of literally any comic right now? you, I can't. I'm not like Leslie Jones, or I'm not. And but, like, that's okay, because so also no one else is like Leslie Jones. Um, so you don't have to be, even to, like, dip a toe in any part of the comedy world, you don't have to be a certain way. You don't have to be more confident, air quotes. You don't have to be less shy, air quotes. You don't have to be louder. You don't have to be like the guy with the lampshade on his head at a party. In fact, please don't. But like, who you are, your vibe is already where your sense of humor and your comedy comes from. And what's great about, if your friends think you're funny, then they're going to make you funnier. Just being among them and getting those laughs. Getting laughs means getting more laughs. So yeah, so there's just even opportunities to just embrace, just to really notice and embrace that, like, I feel happy when I'm with my friends because we're all laughing, and that could be plenty.
Well, and I know so many people, I'm one of them for a long time, that my number one goal in therapy was to make my therapist laugh. When you did, you were like, yes.
Wait, what else are you doing? I mean,
So, that was a safe place to inject some of that, and to do that in a insulated environment, start to pull things out, put them at arm's length. Now, I think there is a component, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, that is an audience member sometimes. So if you are going to, and know some of your comics probably before you buy the ticket, but go somewhere and there's going to be some things that maybe you're not super comfortable with, or they're going to talk about things that you haven't healed from. What are some, as an audience member or as a receiver of those kind of comedic components, that we should be aware of? So, like, it's okay to leave the room, or it's okay to disconnect. What are some of your experiences with that, or things that you've seen?
I can totally see that happening, and it's a great question, and it's a good thing to be prepared for. So this is not to negate your question.
Mhm.
What is it? Negging? I'm not going to neg your question, but, like, typically, If you choose well, you will, like, best case scenario and typical case scenario, if you are in a room with, comics who are talking about that tough stuff, even if it's stuff you relate to and not in a good way, um, typically, if they've gotten to the point where they're talking about it on stage, they're doing it in a way that's responsible, relatable, and not uncomfortable, because they know their job is, they were made very uncomfortable by whatever trauma they're talking about. Their goal is not to make you uncomfortable. Their goal is to find and also, yeah, their goal is to find, is to, within the specifics of the stuff they're talking about, find the primal that everyone can relate to. Whether it's the fears they're talking about or the triumphs that they're talking about, that's their goal. That doesn't mean that everyone is perfectly inoculated, from being triggered or uncomfortable. Yeah, I mean, like, if you need to, if you need to leave, you need to leave for a minute. It's uh you can tell the comics intentions, you know you can tell if they just don't care how the audience feels, which happens but is less likely. You can tell if like they know what they're doing, and are expert at this, but you're just not ready. So of course that would be a great time to go to the restroom, and not in a huff, just that's good timing. I also think that if it's possible, and I'm not telling someone to, like, thug it out, but, like, if it's possible to listen for the primal, right? To to maybe it's something that triggers specific memories, that's not great, but to listen for the primal in what they're saying. That, like, I was fearful and I overcame that fear, because of my friends, or I found community, or I felt alone and then I didn't. Like, those things are all just, like, so listening for, like, what's the theme here? What's the theme? It's not the thing that happened, it's the primal themes. And that's, like, again, if that's not possible, you're not doing it wrong.
Mhm.
But I think that's what I would say. That's what I would say.
Well, and I mentioning that, brings back to this idea of it's not just about the joke, or it's not just about the thing that created the laugh. It's the feeling behind it. It's the intention behind some of it, or how it sits. And you mentioned, when you first reached out, this idea, and I loved it, that comedy skills are life skills. And so I'm
Yeah.
someone that has sat in boardrooms and, in healthcare organizations, and I always tried to inject that in there, but it's not typical, right? You're sitting there with a doctor who's had a really long day, or, a CFO who's trying to figure out how they deal with the finance situation. So, what are some of those skills that comedy helps to sharpen, and brings more awareness to? Because I mean, it makes sense after I read through the list you had, but, it's not what would immediately come to mind.
Well, actually, I'm gonna smoothly. I'm gonna answer something that I meant to say from your previous question, but it actually makes a segue. And that to your current question, and that is the other thing. Typically, when comics are talking about traumatic experiences, they're not, like, recounting them. They're not, like, recounting the bad part, the bad moments, the actual moments of trauma. Typically, what they're doing is finding a way to punch up at the culture that, for example, at the culture that enabled them, right? So if someone is, unfortunately talking about sexual assault, typically what she's going to be doing is making fun of rape culture, but he's captain of the swim team, like, or, whatever, um, and so typically it's not, typically going, it's not just the primal themes, it's the culture, it's the other stuff, it's the pieces of the power that we want to smash, not the, reliving the bad moments. So that is a skill that comedy can provide, which is really looking at something and um being, I'll do it in shorthand. It helps you think faster, write sharper, read the room, listen better. It's not always about talking. Sometimes it's about saying absolutely nothing, or saying one word. or something like that. So that room reading goes a lot into how comics handle talking about tricky subjects, but it also goes into just being, as you were saying, like in a meeting where, like, I don't know, maybe everyone's grumpy from another meeting, maybe everyone's, I don't know, maybe everyone's ready for lunch, maybe everyone, like, whatever it is, just, and if you need to speak into that, like, that's not a great room to speak into, and it, you're in the room, you're not just reading that room, you're in that room, right? So just to be able to say, and you don't have to be like a big joker, just to be able to say, like, okay, real quick, everyone picture what they super want to eat for lunch right now, if you really eat anything for lunch, and someone would be like, mac and cheese, and you'd be like, okay, great. So we did that. We're not having that now. Let's focus. And so, that's not hilarious. I don't know. I just made it up. But it's not just like barging into a situation as if you're a robot talking to robots. It's understanding taking a pretty good guess at what's on everyone's mind, saying that thing, and that releases everyone to move on. So that's why, again, you don't have to be the winner of the Toastmasters, or the president of the Friars Club, or the winner of America's Got Talent, the comedy one, to do this. It's just like, what needs to be said right now, or what needs not to be said right now, and which is a little trickier, but my point is that it doesn't, using humor to improve a situation doesn't require you to like nail the world's best joke.
Well, and I mean, even what you brought up, no, mac and cheese, maybe not hysterical, but the component of you've broken people out of whatever redundancy they're in and you're making them present again, which takes you back to that. If people are listening, and if they're listening, then they're able to kind of shift their own mentality a little bit to where they need to be. And I think thinking on your feet and being kind of quick to know, do I need a pause? Do I need to respond? What's that right component there? I mean, and just the overall building of confidence. So, one little snicker out of the side room makes you're not alone, even if everyone else is stone faced. I always said I interviewed for my job in the federal government, and all of the panel was on mute because it was a virtual. So they were on their phones, no videos. And I cracked what I thought was the best joke in the world, and it was silent. And I was like, I failed. I'm not. I'm never getting another interview. I'm not moving forward. And I ended up getting the job, and I talked to one of my panel members later, and he was like, oh no, we were cracking up. We were just all on mute.
Right,
So
right,
you also make assumptions that you've completely fallen on deaf ears, or you haven't made an impact of some nature, especially in
right.
a virtual world. But
Especially.
the building of the confidence piece, I became known as the person that put a meme on every one of my PowerPoints that opened up a certain
Yes,
meeting.
yes. You
And
got to put a
I know people hated it. There were some that were just like, here she goes again, another one. But there were other people that looked forward to it. That was something that they knew they could rely that we were going to get from me. It was going to break up the day. Well, I wonder what Natalie's got today on her, slide deck or whatever. And that you have to stand behind that. You have to be know that you're not everyone's cup of tea, but I'm
right.
definitely a Cuban, coffee for someone.
Totally. And also, like, even if they're like not the biggest, like, even if your stick in the mud colleagues are not the biggest meme fans, like, it's still like, first of all, hurts who? Like, they'll live. It's one slide. Everybody calm down. Number one. Number two, like, even if it's not their kind of humor, and you're right, not every crowd is everyone's crowd. Not, you, as a comic and as a human, you got to find your people. But also, I would go out on a limb and say, even if it's not their vibe of humor, it humanizes you to them. That, because PowerPoints can be like, or like the dementor of a meeting, right?
Yep.
And if, when done poorly. And so just to have something in there that's like, I see you, I see that. I know sometimes, presentations can be leaden. Let's not do that. I have an old friend, Jen Posner, who, this is not quite the same thing, but one of her big areas of expertise is violence against women in advertising. And she had this real kind of, her keynote was full of slides of like, especially when you saw like there were kind of relentless like liquor ads with women passed out, and like, I mean, it was just like relentless and just and then right in the middle she'd be like, and here's a kitten in underpants, like she'd be like, I know you need a break. So, and it was a break, but also it showed that she was human. She had read enough rooms. Everyone could kind of be like, oh yeah, this is rough. Like it just gave people a moment to kind of come together, exhale for a second, and then carry on with the horror. But like just that, it was, I thought, such a bold, such a smart move. And she's not laughing about violence against women. She's laughing. She's poking fun at people's. She's providing levity around people's appropriate responses to relentless images of violence against women.
So we've touched on the component of, especially for gold comedy, being a space for, women, non-binary, others, which I love. And I think that there's been, and it's ironic because as I was thinking through, I was like, it's probably not as new, it's just more visible, but also the idea of disability neurodivergence. We see a lot of autistic comedians now.
Yep.
We are seeing, Josh Blue when he came out with cerebral palsy,
Yep.
through the reality show, and just even if we talk about body type, it's always been
Yep.
a space where people who are larger, John Candy,
Yep.
all these kind of fell into. And so that component there of now there's this new wave, I guess, that's visible in a lot of ways, but I'm guessing this has always been around, right? It's actually probably a neurodivergent thing that a lot of comedians or people with that mindset have been there, maybe behind the scenes, or not just talking about that label that they've worn in the same nature that they are now.
I mean, yeah. I mean, we've been living in a world not only populated by, but improved by neurodiversity for centuries, right? And in yes, and now in comedy, as with in other spaces, of course, comics are pretty, for lack of a better word, out about it. And I mean, we have tons of people who are in gold who refer to themselves as autistic, certainly ADHD, certainly on various types of various spectrums, also different chronic illness, different kinds of invisible disability, some with visible disability. I mean, like, yeah, it's just it's a slice of the population, But we've done shows that have been entirely only, I mean, on purpose, our neurodivergent members, and they have been so funny because they make fun of their own whatevers that are divergent, right?
Mhm.
Um, and absolutely hilarious. And I can't tell you whether like they're more drawn to. I don't have any statistics or but I can tell you from experience and copious anecdote that there is a real superpower when you combine comedy and neurodivergence. Absolutely. And I'm just glad that people, never mind for comedy's sake, I'm just glad that we have like the names and the tools now to kind of be as supportive and also celebratory as possible,
Yeah.
and open so that it's actually an asset, not just to you the performer, but to your audience.
Yeah. So on the flip side of that, how do people in the industry take care of themselves? So I think of some of the tragedies we've had, right? Where you feel like you're responsible for the humor, and then behind the scenes they're suffering. And then, we look at Robin Williams or others. And so, how what are ways that people who may feel responsible for that lightness can come to terms or come to peace with it's okay to be balanced, and what types of things to look for or tap into?
The two kind of complaints, for lack of a better word, that come to mind are, first of all, yeah, like it can be relentless, this relentlessness of because comedy has to be relentless. I mean, comedy, you can't, let's talk about stand up or really anything, writing monologue jokes. You got to get in your reps. Like no one just, no one bursts forth from the womb or egg or whatever a fully formed comedian. No one. It takes 10 years to be an overnight success. Okay. So, um, the only way to develop, and this is like, sorry, but the only way to develop a skin as thick as you might need, some people don't, is also the only way to succeed in comedy, which is to do it a lot. The upside of doing it a lot is that one off night, one day that, like, that Trevor Noah doesn't pick your jokes, whatever it is, it's one in a million. I mean, it's like, oh, that's just Tuesday that happens. So it's getting in your reps and repetition and knowing that it's not personal. You are not responsible. You're not. Um, and I mean, you're responsible to a certain degree to, like, take care of your audience the way we talked about, but you're not responsible. It's just in life, right? That's like, your therapist will tell you that you can't make anyone do anything. You're not responsible for their reaction. They're responsible for their reaction. Like, it's just, there's only so much you can do. And the kind of, like, it's a little bit Pollyanna, but it's super true. The advice that comics tell us all the time, in our celebrity speaker series, we have a celebrity speaker series, is do what's funny to you. Like, that's all you got. And of course, if you keep doing this one thing that you think is hilarious and no one has laughed at it from Cleveland to California, okay, maybe that's not the one. But, like, that's a place to start, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other one that people have talked about is, as it's inclusivity in comedy is worlds better than it used to be. I'm happy to talk also about how it's not, but like, overall, it's worlds better. However, we we have one instructor, Mark Kramer, who is a very experienced late night writer. He's Filipino. He's talked about how, and he has for a long time for many times had been, like, the only dude of color in the room. And relatable. We've all been the only woman in the room in so many rooms, right? And he has talked about, even in a friendly room, that can be exhausting, and just exhausting, like, being the one. And I think that's super relatable. And I didn't take his classes at Gold. I've taken his shorter workshops, but not his longer class. So I don't. But he acknowledges. So I don't know what his sort of tips and tricks are, but I know that that is a thing. And I imagine that it is partly a thing that in that moment you have to thug it out. But also, but there's also a difference between, like, a room that's hostile about it and a room where it's just tiring. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that, in fairness, he's been I'm not sure, but I think he's been in the ones that are just tiring. And so then to find other ways, when you're not in the room, to be where you're not the only one.
Yeah.
So that you kind of, as they say, fill up your bucket, and then you can kind of go back into the room more energized, and then also really feel like you're contributing something, because you're helping it be not all white dudes. It doesn't make it your responsibility, but you'll have something different to contribute.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the piece of, finding others that you can connect with, huge in the world of social media, right? Where there are overnight, people that just happen to have a really funny, reel or something, and it goes viral. And I just had a guest on, and she said, when she shifted her platform to talk about her sobriety journey, someone wrote her and was like, you need to go back to what you were doing. You haven't made me belly laugh. And she cried about it, and then, eventually got through it. But this idea of, well, someone else was relying on me for that. Now I'm not doing it, but I'm being true to myself. And what's that balance piece? But I think that's where there's a huge environment of people, at least in the social media world, that can be like, no, that's a Tuesday. That's your, that person is your Tuesday.
Right. And
It's
they're not responding to you. How wonderful that people develop parasocial relationships with you because they love you.
yeah,
And if that's not what you're doing, that's not what you're doing. So ideally, that person will still come to you for the new stuff and go somewhere else for belly laughs, and they're going to be okay. It's not your job. It's
yeah,
just you. You can't. Yeah. Yeah. You just can't be, because then you're gonna have that. The other person telling you the opposite, like, thank God you're not doing the belly laughs anymore. Like, where does that leave you? You can't. You do have to respond. Comics, stand-ups refine and improve their work by listening to people, but it's not by listening to individuals telling them what they need from them. it's like it's more big data, you know. It's like in the aggregate, when and where and how does this joke work in the aggregate. And you only know by doing it over and over. It's not trust me, it's not individual feedback.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about one thing you mentioned at the very beginning. I think it's great to come back as kind of a final. It's the topic I've been waiting for sure, which is dark humor. And you mentioned kind of shame in the beginning, right? Is that we're not talking about things with an intent to shame. And I think the component of intentionality behind everything is what kind of ties over because well, I gave the example and I'll be frank. And we chatted about this. Volunteer with a local animal rescue and kitten season over the summer is horrific. It is hundreds and hundreds of sick kittens. No one can take them in. They're abandoned. They're, injured. And at one point, there were so many in our rescue that we were just like, is this cat dead? It was like a dead or alive game. We would take a picture and be like, am I moving to this one or going to the next one, going to this one? And we're like, we hope no one ever sees this because they're not going to get it because
Nope.
they're not in the industry or they're not in this area. But we would be so happy in most cases because those babies had made it through the night.
Yep.
And the comedy of it was, look, another one didn't die. Great success for the day, and I think we see that in a lot of traumatic areas. So in healthcare, in, law enforcement, in these areas that, there's not a ton of bright spots sometimes, and the people that are engaged in it, their coping mechanism is is
Yeah.
the whole piece, but it's more real-time trauma, like, management. So tell me a little bit about your viewpoint, your explanation you gave me on dark humor, which was great, but let's chat dark humor for a minute.
Sure. And I mean, just to start with the animal shelter and as an example. So what's different about that, or not? What's unique about that? What's unique about that is, first of all, who's the audience? Yourselves, right? You all get it. You're all on the same page. Number one. Number two. Therefore, where is it doing harm? You know, you're not. There's no harm. There's no harm. I mean, it's like it's like in one of the old fashioned uses of comedy. You're releasing tension and you're bonding. You're kind of trauma bonding, in a way that does no harm to anyone else. You'd have to work pretty hard to turn that into stand-up material because it's the same reason that like animals never die in movies. Like people cannot take it, right? So everything is fair game. It just really depends on as you said, intentionality and audience. And so I think that it goes back to a little bit of what we were talking about before, where, as with, let's say, sexual assault, in the right, if we're doing it right, we are not joking about sexual assault. We are joking and punching up at the power structures that make people stupid about it, right? We're punching up at stupid Harvey Weinstein. We're punching up at, but he's such a promising rugby player. Like, what, we're punching up at what was she wearing, and so that's why I think that uh, no topic is off limits, no matter how dark. It's just that you need to know your audience and it has to be a damn good joke. And inherent in being a damn good joke is, and this is almost a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true, is it punching up?
And I'm
And is it
guessing
clever? At baseline, is it punching up?
yeah.
And like even more than that, what do I mean by good joke? Is it clever? Does it make us see something in a way we hadn't quite seen it before? Does it shine a flashlight into a new corner? And then if it does, knock yourself out. And again, you're like, one person may have to go to the bathroom, but that's okay. Because if your intention is to not make anyone uncomfortable, but rather share authentically about something that you're prepared to share because you're not journaling on stage, and that you've thought carefully about how you will present it in a way that takes care of the audience, then you can do some really transformational stuff.
And is it a good rule of thumb to stick with things that you know? So in regards to, there are things I have not experienced, and I certainly wouldn't feel comfortable attempting to make light or tap into, but there are definitely things I have that I would not want someone else who hadn't been through. So that idea of you write about what you know, but does that same rule apply to comedy?
Yeah. I mean, I'm having like a blob of a memory, and I don't, it's not specific, but I'm having sort of like a morass of memories of like, I'm sorry, but dudes, making fun of topics that are clearly just their opinion on a topic with which they are not demonstrating that they have any personal experience or have ever actually asked any questions about that topic, and they just opine. And that is a great way to not connect with your audience. So it doesn't mean that every single comic in the world has to be entirely autobiographical. I mean, there are these like the greats like Robin Williams, Dimitri Martin. There's so many people who just like talk about like Julio Torres. Oh my God, he doesn't his some of his TV work is loosely inspired by his experience as an immigrant, but like his brand as a comic is he talks about like shapes and colors. Like it's not autobiographical. Like, but he has thought a lot about shapes and colors. He's brilliant. And so my point is like not everything. Talk about what you know, or talk about something you really think a lot about and are a big nerd for. Which in this case is not his life story, but if you've ever seen him do, I think he was on Fallon doing impressions of colors. Not his life story, some of the most hilarious, wonderful, and whimsical, and delightful, and just side-splitting comedy I've ever seen. So
Yep.
yeah, it doesn't have to be like all about you all the time. But it is authentic because that is authentically on brand for Julio Torres.
Yeah. Well, so I do want to take the second to, you mentioned Julio Torres. What are some other comedians that you would recommend that maybe aren't top of mind for folks to check out?
Sure. Julio Torres. I just saw that bit and I was obsessed. Um, I've loved him. Even he doesn't do much stand up anymore, but his stand up is also just magical. Um, I also love actually a multi hyphenate named Carrie Coddett, Coddett. Great stand up, great sketch. She has a new film coming out called Zeke. She has a one woman show this weekend in New York City. Watch her. She's also writing a crime drama. You'll be like, oh my God, I totally heard her on Natalie's podcast. I also love Cameron Esposito. I also love Maria Bamford, who are very autobiographical, but so clearly themselves, and no comic could ever be like, they're just unique. No comic could ever be like them. You can never confuse another comic for them. And I also love Naomi Ekperigin. She's been on late night. She has a podcast, I believe. Did she still have the podcast? I'm not sure. She's one of my favorite, like everybody knows her, but under the radar. Like all the comics know her. And she's in LA. But she's just brilliant. Oh, and James Tom, who I've known for years, who wrote on his stand-up is amazing. He wrote on what's the Pirates one? By the same guy who did Reservation Dogs. We Are Pirates. I'm messing it up. Okay. Anyway, James Tom. Really interesting. Recently transitioned. Just interesting guy. Super nice guy. Really original. Our flag means death. That's it. Our flag means death. So those are a bunch. Oh, and Murray Hill, the entire Jeff Hiller, Bridget Everett, the entire cast of Somebody Somewhere. All very nice people, I might add. Bragging. Because I know them one way or the other from New York. So I also recommend that entire show.
Well, I love it. And my husband and I, every night we sit down and Nate Jackson's one of our favorite, the comment,
Sure.
the crowd work, and we'll watch his most recent episodes before bed. And it's funny because laughing actually will make us tired. And
Yeah,
so that's when
sure.
we'll go to bed. And last night we were up till 1 in the morning and I said, let's do a little Zillow gone wild. And so we pulled up some of the local like buildings and we went through them and we're like, what is and everything. And we were out within probably 5 minutes of closing
I
up
love
the
it.
phone, even though it was a screen, because we had just distracted ourselves from everything that was running through our brains and
Yep.
keeping us
Yep.
up and just like nagging. And all of a sudden I was thinking about this wild floor to ceiling painting in someone's house that they had on their Zillow, posting. So I think that there's so many incredible ways to use and find that kind of motivation, that injection of just a different feeling in your day by tapping into your self comedy, your comedy of others, the things that you can find easily accessible now, probably more than ever, which is also, I think, a really beautiful thing. But Lynn, as we wrap, I want to just touch on Gold Comedy and the services that you offer, especially for the groups that you've mentioned, because accessibility isn't just about finding it, it's about how can I do better or what are resources out there for me. And I know that's some of the stuff that you have. So tell us a little bit about what Gold Comedy offers and where can we find information on it?
Sure, thank you. Um, what's cool about us is that yes, we have classes, which sounds, which will sound familiar to you: stand up, sketch, production, web series, editing for comics. Um, you, Actually, we have a lot of classes that other people don't. We have great classes. Um, the main things that are different about us, first of all, they're mostly online. So wherever you are listening right now, we got you. Um, Second of all, with a couple of exceptions, the main way that we work is you don't pay by the class, you pay by the year. So once you, and by the way, that once you paid for the year, like you've paid about as much as you'd pay for like a class and a half somewhere else. And for the whole year, you get unlimited classes. You can take as many as you want. You can take the same class over and over if you want the accountability and the structure. And you have access to our super friendly open mics, our celebrity speaker series. We have Zoom meet and greets with the cast of Somebody Somewhere or people like that. We have shows, we have showcases, we have other workshops, we have just something going on certainly every week and almost every day. And the other is, we just we can't like label or police by gender or what people call themselves. That's why we talk about others. What we can promise, we got some very nice straight dudes. We've got a couple of very nice white dudes. Like they're around. But when I say very nice, what I mean is what we can promise is we have no bro vibe, and that is often either what people are escaping when they come to us, or it's what has been stopping them from either starting or going farther. Um, because we are just nice, supportive. You won't be the only one in the room telling menopause jokes, you know, and we're just you won't be the only you in a room full of 21-year-old dudes with hoodies who may be hilarious and wonderful, but you won't be, whatever it is, you won't be the only one. So it just it takes away not even just a layer of negativity, it takes away a layer of something else to think about, so that you, like, when there's no bro vibe, you can just come and do comedy. uh you don't have to prove that women are funny. You don't have to, and not that you won't have to go out in the world and be in other spaces that are less comfortable, but like we all do. So, and the other thing that's different about us is that we really help people get their stuff made. It's not just skill building is great, and we do that. We are committed to that, but we also have a so what. Like, what are you going to do with it? Will you take our solo show class and put up your solo show in New York City, which 4 Goldies just did? Will you take our comedy about trauma class and create a triple header of mini solo shows in Boston, which 3 of our alums just did? We have 2 web series that are like you can watch right now. One is on Fox Soul, which is a streamer attached to Fox, or actually a fast channel there's so many different things. Um, so we really want you to like make your stuff, get it seen. Like we're really serious about building your career, your visibility, your success. If you want to just come along for the ride and just give it a whirl, of course you're welcome. But we're very serious about that. And last thing I'll say is we have we have a class that no one else has, for sure, called Build and Pitch Any Idea. And there are a lot of pretty good pitching classes for sure. But what our class does, and the instructor's name is Ryan Cunningham, producer, Broad City, Search Party, Amy Schumer, No Big Deal. Um, also produces theater, directs theater and film. And she helps you go, like you come out with a professional industry standard pitch for your idea, whether it's a TV show, podcast, unscripted film, whatever it may be. But you can't make you can't write your pitch until until your idea is part of your soul. And like you could do a snazzy Canva thing, but that's not what you do in this class. You nurture your idea until you really can breathe it. And people from that class go on to get their shows into development, write pilots that win awards. They really have direct and concrete success because of this pretty, rigorous training and transformation that Ryan leads. So we run that about every quarter. So find out about that on our website. And if you tell me you found out about Gold through Natalie, I'll send you a code for 10% off, or I'll give it to you for the show notes.
I love it. And I think, that last piece being, it doesn't have to be that you want to be comfortable being in a stage or on a show or anything. You can fully be behind the scenes and have your power in the writing or that editing piece that you talked about. So lots of different ways to get involved. I will ask, who are a couple of your celebrity folks that come and do the sessions?
Sure. Well, SNL alum Rachel Dratch is actually an advisor. So she comes around more than once a year, does Zooms with us. We have had Margaret Cho. We've had Rachel Bloom. We've had Patty Harrison. We have had Jeff Hiller and Murray Hill. Murray is a friend of Gold, so Murray's been around a lot. Bridget Everett has done stuff for us. Sydney Washington. What other big names Paula Pell. The writing staff of The Daily Show, writers from SNL, writers from a Black Lady sketch show. We really don't mess around. We have a great time.
I love it. And I hope that we'll have some folks that take you up on this. I know I've got one that I'll be directly saying, you need to go listen to this episode. Because I think, the idea of it being something that is accessible, you don't have to live in New York City to do it. You don't have to be going into a studio, to sit down and do the improv with people necessarily. Works for a lot of folks nowadays. So,
and you don't have to have any experience to take the pitching class, especially. You do not have to have any knowledge of the entertainment industry. You do not have to have written a pilot. You do not have to have a dad who was on the Lampoon or whatever. It's actually designed for, it's a high level class, but it is designed for people who have an idea that they cannot get out of their head. And they don't, and there's women in their 50s who take it. There's who are medical doctors. We have a veterinary oncology surgeon in the class right now. It's people who are just like, I am serious about this idea, whether it becomes my career pivot or just a creative side hustle that I really care about. I am locking in, using the expertise that I have from the rest of my life, even if it's not in comedy or entertainment. And that is like really where the magic happens.
And dare I say, even taking that may help with other pitches that you have to make in life that make them stand out a little bit differently. Can you imagine if we went in and we pitched something in a children's hospital that had a touch of that humor to it or had a touch of that humanity to it? It might look a little bit different than every other pitch of a program that comes in. So lots of different ways to think about it. But Lynn, I just want to say thank you so much for reaching out. You were my very first reach out to say, hey, can I come on the pod? And this has been great. I hope that folks have laughed. I hope that they're like thinking a little bit differently about their own mindsets or where they may have opportunities to grow and build and empower in this way. And if you've been sitting on that great joke, you're the person at the table at Thanksgiving or Christmas that gets everyone laughing. Maybe there's a little bit more to it that you can tap into. Ask
Maybe.
for the classes for a year for your Christmas present, and get the discount code we'll share with y'all for that. So, Lynn, thank you. I can't wait to share this out with everyone. And I just so appreciate you coming on today and bringing a little bit of lightness and reality and power to the conversation that I think we tend to just gloss over occasionally. So this has been great.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Talk soon. Thanks, Lynn.
Talk soon.